Man, what a great time we've had the last couple of weeks, right? Just from Rich Wilkerson coming. I don't know what you think about when you think about Rich Wilkerson's time with us, but Rich Jr.'s, the one thing that just continues to stay in front of me, that God gave him to give all of us, was to just don't ever underestimate God. Don't ever underestimate the power of God. Don't ever underestimate the love of God. And then past Rich being with us, it was so amazing to have this one-day revival with Pastor McDonald, and then to have Francis come and unpack just solid theology, right, about the glory of God through the suffering of man, and has just been such a gift. And then today and tonight to be able to sit under the teaching of really one of the great teachers of our time, Erwin McManus, is just such a gift. And we love you, brother. We told you a little while ago in the green room that that many of us have had our lives just impacted by your writing, by your teaching. You certainly have done well in pouring into this generation, and we get to now thank you in person. Erwin is a clothing designer. He's a songwriter. He's a pastor. Honestly, he's just a very creative being that does incredible things for the glory of God. He's just a guy who's very available to students, and we just honestly are just grateful that he would take the time to come all the way from LA, from the West Coast, to be with us today. Can we put our hands together for the great Erwin McManus?
Wow. I'm not sure which way to face, but it is so exciting to be here with you guys. And for me, it's extraordinarily shocking that I would be here. About 6 or 7 years ago, I found myself in a personal crisis, maybe a crisis of faith. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up as a person of faith. And when I made a decision to follow Jesus, I didn't know he had a massive organization all over the world. I had never really been aware of the church, and becoming a follower of Christ was not an easy experience for me. And I started writing books and became more public. And I don't know if you know this, but there are a lot of mean people out there who use Jesus' name as their identification. And about 7 years ago, I sat down with my wife and I told her I think I'm going to shift careers. I'm going to step out of any public space, and I'm going to become a filmmaker and fashion designer. I'm going to spend the rest of my life as an artist. And my wife, who's incredibly amazing and supportive, said, sure, go right ahead. And so a year later, I had a fashion company and a film company, and I was slipping out of any kind of public space for ministry, and my wife looked at me and said, hey, we need to talk. It seems like you've moved on to a different life, and we need to have a conversation. And I said, well, we had this conversation. Remember a year ago when I told you I was going to become an artist and I was going to step out of ministry, and you said, sure, go right ahead. And she said, that doesn't count because I didn't think you could make it. And a huge part of it for me was, many times it seems as if we have conversations about things, but we never actually stop and think about them. We can become a people of cliches that say things that everyone says, but never dig deep to see if we really believe what they mean. And for me, belief has never been easy. Even though I think I love the whole journey of faith, believing is hard. For some people, believing is easy. They just believe so naturally. My wife is like that. She just has a powerful belief. But for me, belief comes at a huge cost in my life. And I started looking for a place I belonged. And I don't know if you've ever felt in your life that you just didn't belong on this planet. You didn't belong with this species. And so one of my friends who is a scientist and an artist came to me and said, you need to apply for this community called TED. It stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. There's some of the best thinkers, and there's scientists and botanists and biologists and designers. And I don't know, have you ever heard of TED at all? So it was before it went public, before they had the TED Talks, and you have to apply. So I thought, okay, I'm going to apply to TED and see if I can get in. I want to be a part of this community. I want to be a part of a place that pursues truth and is open to exploration. And so I applied, and they turned me down. Because evidently you have to be good at something and have some kind of expertise or something. And And when they turned me down, I was a little discouraged, but I applied again because I'm relentless if I'm anything. And so I applied a second time, and they turned me down again. But I'm comfortable with rejection because I used to date, so I went ahead and I applied a third time. And I kept changing my story, and each time I extricated anything about my faith and just put more about my work as an artist, and they still turned me down. And so then I heard about this thing called TED Global. They were going to do their first TED in a country called Tanzania, in a city called Arusha. And I'd never been to Arusha, Tanzania, but I thought to myself, I think fewer people will apply to the TED in Tanzania because it's so hard to get to. See, you may not be able to tell, but I'm actually a Latino. And if you know anything about Latino, is that you can lock the door, but that's okay because we'll go around and we'll find an open window. And I think this is Ted's open window. So I applied to TED in Arusha, Tanzania, and I got accepted because so few people applied. But then I had to get to Africa. So I flew to South Africa because I wasn't really sure how to get to Tanzania. Then I went from South Africa to Tanzania. Then they have some kind of warning about yellow fever, and you have to have the right vaccinations. And you can get into Tanzania without those vaccinations, but couldn't get out of Tanzania without them. And I thought, oh, it's okay, that's next week's problem. So I just flew into Tanzania, and I was there at my first TED, and I was so excited. But have you ever been someplace you knew you did not belong, and you were terrified that everyone there would know really quickly that you did not belong there? And it was one of those moments that I'm an extreme social introvert. I'm one of those people who's socially awkward and doesn't know what to do in a room. And if you put more than 3 people, I start having an anxiety attack. And my children and my wife have always been embarrassed by that. And so I'm on the phone with my kids walking into TED, and my son and daughter are coaching me on how to relate to humans. And so my daughter is saying, okay, Dad, move toward the people. Go inside. My son's like, he's just giving me a pep talk. Dad, you've always wanted to go to TED. You wanted to meet these TED people. Don't go stand in a corner. Dad, just people will like you. You need to believe people will like you. And my daughter goes, okay, make eye contact. I go, eye contact, it's confusing. If you don't make enough, it doesn't help. If you make too much, it's really weird. And so and then my daughter said something I'll never forget. She said, look for someone who needs a friend more than you. And I thought, am I that desperate? My son said, yes. I thought, no, I have a better strategy. I'm looking for the nicest person in the room because kind people can't tell you they don't want to talk to you. So I looked around, and I saw this older woman. She was older than me, and I was pretty much the oldest person there. And when I saw her, I thought, she looks so kind. And she got in line at the buffet line. And so I got in line right behind her. And I said, hi, my name is Erwin. This is my first TED. And she told me her name and told me her history. And then I said, do you have anyone to eat with? She said, no. So we sit down at a table, started eating together. And it was one of those round tables that seats about 10 people. And immediately, 8 other people sat with us. I thought, wow, I'm at TED. And there are 10 people sitting at a table with me. I'm meeting humans. This is so exciting. And me and this woman just talked for an hour. But have you ever talked to someone who, no matter what you want to talk about, they just want to talk about whatever they want to talk about? You know what I'm talking about? Like, it just doesn't matter. And so you want to talk about the political situation. They're talking, yeah, I'm really worried about the Washington Redskins. They're not doing very well. And you're like, oh, you mean my girlfriend just broke up with me? He goes, yeah, man, I'm brokenhearted about the Redskins too. I mean, no matter what you talk about, they just want to talk about whatever they want to talk about. She was like that. No matter what I talked about, she kept talking about chimpanzees, which I thought was really strange. And I go, well, I'm really worried about the situation in China because of the political and dynamics. And she goes, chimpanzees have political organizations. I go, oh. And I started talking about like human relationships. She goes, well, chimpanzees have relational systems too. And I tried to talk to her about chimpanzees, but I ran out of material within the first 2 minutes. But she just kept going and going. After an hour, I looked at her and I said, Jane, can I ask you a question? And because I thought, who knows so much about chimpanzees? There's only 2 people, and they're both named Jane. One's related to Tarzan, and the other one's a woman named Jane Goodall. So I said, are you Jane Goodall? She goes, of course I am. And I said, well, that explains the whole chimpanzee thing. And every single person I met from that moment forward was an expertise in a species. They had spent their whole life studying one flower that cured a disease, or the migration of bees through Central America that solved a huge global problem. And now I'm sort of a TED fanatic. I've been to over a dozen TEDs around the world and across the US. And I just I felt as if I was showing up without my material. And I told my wife, I said, I need a species. I cannot go back to TED without a species. I just always feel so naked. And when they ask me, what do you do? And I just make things up and pick a different thing each time. And finally I just started saying, I do a lot of things, but nothing well. And they go, oh, you're a writer. And, which actually is what I am. I am a writer, and now I know why I write, because I can't do. And I said, but I need a species, honey. And she goes, well, what do you mean? I said, I need a species I know something about. And then it hit me. Almost all of my life, I've been a human. And humans are my favorite species. I love humans. I love observing humans from a distance. And they're fascinating. And so I thought, what is it that makes us uniquely human? And I know here at this particular convocation, you probably focus so much more on who God is. But I want to take a few moments and talk about who you are. You see, I think that we have spent so much of our energy trying to develop layers of theology, but have a very thin and shallow understanding of humanity. And what we need more than a theological breakthrough is that we need an anthropological breakthrough. We need to know who we are. And if we can understand what it means to be human, maybe we can make sense of this little phrase in the scripture that says that you are created in the image and likeness of God. What is it that makes us distinct from every other species? What makes a human being different than a giraffe or a kangaroo or an aardvark? I want to read a passage of scripture, and I want you to hear it, hopefully, from a different vantage point today. It's in Hebrews chapter 11. I'll read verses 1 through 3, then verse 6. It says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. And without faith, verse 6, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Now, to begin with, verse 6 is kind of unfair, because it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. Now, why in the world would God make that the criteria for humans, but for no other species? I mean, I don't think rabbits are sitting around going, am I doing this right? Am I running by faith? I don't think that orangutans are going, I don't know, is this the life of faith or not? See, I don't think roses are concerned about whether they're living by faith. Nothing else on this planet, no other species created by God is held to this criteria that you have to have faith to please God. So why would God hold humans to this standard and no other species that he created? See, I think we use faith as a language that really becomes more magical than actual reality. See, faith, if it's necessary to please God, restores to us our humanity. See, if it requires faith to please God, it means that the life we live as a species without faith makes us less than human. And in fact, we have a language for that. We call it inhumane. Isn't it odd that we talk about things that are inhumane? How can a human do something that's inhumane? Because if we're human, then everything we do is humane. Everything we do is human. I mean, have you ever watched the National Geographic channel? See a lion pounce on a gazelle, tear it by the throat, eat lunch without cooking it or leaving a tip, and no one talks about that lion being in lion. They say, well, what an awesome, powerful creature. You don't look at a lizard watching a bug flying through the air, stick out that tongue, suck it in, eat it, and go, ooh, man, that thing is evil. Because it's a lizard. But if a human did that, well, it'd be terrifying. See, we humans are the species created with the highest intention, Yet we're the only species that have the potential to live without intention. Faith pleases God because it restores our humanity. I want you to see with me how it does that. Beginning in verse 1, it says, now faith is confidence what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Do you ever read a passage of scripture and it doesn't actually make any sense? But you pretend it makes sense because everyone else is acting like it makes sense? So you all go on living as if you understood it, but it never really makes any sense at all? See, this passage does not express what we experience in reality. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for. I wonder how many of us really have confidence in what we hope for. See, if you're like me, I have confidence in what I have, not what I hope for. In fact, it's easy to have confidence in what I have, not confidence in what I hope for. In fact, most of us have no confidence in what we hope for, so we live in despair, in regret, in fear, filled with anxiety and stress because we do not have confidence in what we hope for. We have confidence in what we have, and we don't like what we have. Have you ever had a friend who hated the person they were dating? Come on. You know what I'm talking about? The girl's like, oh, I just can't. He's just so insensitive. He's just a jerk. Sometimes I don't even know why I'm dating him. And you're all going, why are you dating him? And she goes, oh, it just makes me so mad. You're like, break up with him. But she's not going to do it. You know why? Because she doesn't have confidence in the guy she hopes for. She has confidence in the guy she has. It's the same with the guy, man. You ever heard these guys talk about like the girl they're dating as if she's just a placeholder? See, the reality is you'll date someone you're miserable with because you have more confidence in what you have than what you hope for. Some of you here, you're going to work jobs you hate. And you're going to hold on to the job. I know people who do this, and they go, I just hate my job. I hate my boss. I hate my job. I hate everything about it. They go, why don't you just quit? You go, oh, no, I can't just quit. They go, if you hate your job, go find a job you love or make a job you love. But the reason they keep the job they hate is because they have confidence in the job they have, not the one they hope for. See, I know all kinds of people who hate their lives. They go, I just hate my life. I've had people ask me the strangest questions. If you could live in any city you wanted to, where would you live? I go, I can't live in any city I want to. I am a free man. And I choose to live in LA. I hear all these Christians, oh, you know, I'm here because God wants me here. I mean, we act as if God is the ultimate torturer of our souls. See, if you don't like the life you have, choose a different one. But we have more confidence in the life we have than the life we hope for. See, faith is confidence in what you hope for. Now, the beautiful thing about hope is that hope does not exist in the past. That's regret. Hope does not exist in the present. Hope only exists in the future. In fact, what the scriptures tell us is something gives you hope, but once you have it, it is no longer a source of hope. See, you as a human being are designed as a future-oriented creature. See, when you have confidence in what you hope for, it means you always have confidence in the future. It means you have more confidence that the future will be better than the past. You cannot live your life if you believe that yesterday will be better than tomorrow. If you do not believe that tomorrow is filled with possibility, with opportunity, with beauty, with wonder, with adventure, with amazement, if you are a person who does not believe that tomorrow is worth living for, you will not be living a life that God created you to live. Because a human being is to live their life with confidence in what they hope for. You're a future-oriented creature. But it also says that, that faith gives us an assurance in what we do not see. Now, again, I think we have more assurance in what we do see. How about you? Do you have more assurance in what you don't see? Or do you have assurance in what you do see? See, I have assurance in what I do see, and I have to work at having assurance in what I don't see. So if we have two chairs, and there's one chair I can see and one chair I can't see, and you offer me one and offer David one, I'll say, David, you can have the chair that we can't see because you have more faith than me. And so I'll sit in the chair I can see because that's my limited faith. If you offer me a Honda Civic that I can see, or a Lamborghini that I can't see, as much as it would be great to have that Lamborghini, I'm going to take the Honda Civic I can see because I have more assurance in what I can see than what I can't see. But here's how faith shifts us and makes us future-oriented Christians, that people, humans, that have confidence that we hope for, but also assurance in what we do not see. You're supposed to live in the invisible, To be human is to live in the future, invisible. What makes humans different than every other species? See, what we don't see about humans is that in the same way that bees create hives and ants create colonies, humans create futures. See, one of the amazing things about you as a human being, created in the image and likeness of God, is that what you can do that no other species can do is that you can actually materialize the invisible. Doesn't that sound like a superpower? But I'm telling you, you actually materialize the invisible, but it's so natural to you that you are unaware that you do it. Look at this verse 3. It says, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Now, this is important. See, what science tells us, I love science. What science tells us is that everything comes out of something, and that something came out of nothing. That's the Big Bang. And what we know through empirical proof is that everything comes out of something, but then we have to believe that something came out of nothing. But what people of faith say is that everything came out of something, and that something came out of nothing, but God created out of nothing, ex nihilo. So actually what we're saying is the same thing that scientists are saying, that everything came out of something and something came out of nothing. But what the Bible says is different than what science or Christians say, which is a little disturbing. It says, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. See, it does not say that what is seen comes out of that which did not exist. It says what was seen came out of that which was not visible, which is different. There is a difference between something that's not visible and something that's not there. See, the oxygen in this room is not visible, but it exists. Now, when the scriptures tell us that God created everything that is visible out of that which is not visible, what is it talking about? When I wrote my first book, I had a subtitle that says, Becoming the People God Dreams of. And the publisher sent me a note back saying, we can't use that. And I said, why? And they said, because God doesn't dream. I said, no, God does dream. They go, no, God doesn't dream. You can't use that. And I said, but God does dream. They go, even if he does, you can't use it because Christians don't believe that God dreams. So I sent a different subtitle that said, Becoming the People God Has in Mind. And they said, we love it. And it's going to take you a little while, but you'll see the absurdity of this. We believe that God has things in mind, but we don't believe that God dreams. But here's the crazy thing about it. See, everything God created came out of that which is not visible. Do you know what's not visible? An idea, a dream, a vision. See, God says to Jeremiah, before you were born, I knew you. He's saying you existed in the imagination of God before you were a fetus in the womb of your mother. You were a dream in the mind of God before you were an infant in the arms of your father. Where you come from matters, and you were born out of a dream. And that dream was the dream of God, and God imagined you, and then he created you. You were materialized out of the invisible into the visible. Now here's the beautiful thing, God gave you that capacity. In fact, not only that, God gives you this unique capacity so that you can usher in the future only he could imagine. God gives you dreams and visions. God gives you ideas and imagination. And in this invisible space, God begins to form the future that must be created out of you. But we're so terrified of this because we know how dark our hearts can become. And we've seen the horror and ugliness of what humans can create. And so we become afraid that humans create because we're so destructive. But I want you to know that you cannot exist without creating. The question is not whether you will create. The question is, what will you create? See, every human being is an artist. You are both a work of art and an artist at work. I want to take a real quick poll. How many of you would say, I am a creative genius? Go ahead, just raise your hand. Okay, very, very fearful here. All right, so and just hold it up. If you're a creative genius, just let people live with it. Okay? Very, very few of you, maybe 1% of 1%. Okay, well, you need to do better enrolling, okay? And all right, let's try a different one. How many of you would say that you are a linguistic savant? If you don't know what the word savant is, forget about the first question, okay? All right, linguistic savant, raise your hand. Okay, one, not even fewer, okay, wow. All right, let me try this because I want everyone to feel good. How many of you speak English? Raise your hand, all right. I don't think woo is English, but that's all right, that's good. Now here's the crazy thing. You speak English. English is one of the most difficult languages in the world to learn. And you did not learn English when you were a PhD student. You did not learn English when you got here to the university. You did not learn English when you were in high school or junior high. You learned English when you were 2 years old. You were 2 years old. You could barely walk. You couldn't feed yourself. You couldn't flush a toilet. You could not get a job. You had no value to society at all. You're completely dependent on your parents, but you could learn one of the most complicated languages in the world. And I'm telling you, at the age of 2, if they had moved you to China, you would have learned Mandarin or Cantonese. If they'd moved you to the Philippines, you would have learned Tagalog. If they'd moved you to Germany, you would have learned German. If they'd moved you to England, you would have finally learned English. You know why? Because when you were born, you were a linguistic savant. You just forgot. Because you ended up conforming to the expectations of those around you. And your brain shrunk based on the expectations you had of yourself. But when you were born, you were a linguistic savant. I'm from El Salvador. I knew Spanish before I knew English. And then I learned English by the time I was 5, 6, 7 years old. It was easy. Then I studied German and Korean and Mandarin and French. Languages are easy if you understand where you began. You are a linguistic savant who forgot your potential. But you're also a creative genius that believed the lie that you were less. When I began writing this last book called The Artisan Soul, my wife Kim came to me and she'd been asking me to write a book again. I'd stopped for 5 or 6 years, and when she saw me writing, she was so excited. And I love when my wife is excited about what I'm doing. And she goes, "You're writing again?" And I said, "Yes, I'm writing a book." She goes, "What's it called?" And I just called it Artisan at the time. I said, "Artisan." And she said, You're just such a genius. I don't even know how I got the privilege of marrying you. When I walk into a room, in your presence, I'm just inspired by you. Well, she didn't say any of that. And that's what I imagined. And what she actually said is, "Great, a book for people like you. What about the rest of us?" Which is why I tell you the other story. It's what she should have said. And I said, "This is exactly why I'm writing this book, because you have believed the lie that they're creative people, imaginative people, artists, inventors, dreamers, and then there's the rest of us that are simply supposed to sit back and admire what they accomplish. But the reality is that every human being is created in the image and likeness of God. That every human being has the capacity to materialize the invisible. That every human being is designed by God to imagine a future that does not exist and then find the courage and passion to turn that future into reality. God has left you on this planet because He has one strategy of ushering in the future He imagines, and that's you. So many people sit around going, "God, do something. God, look at the condition of this world. Do something. God, look at the suffering and injustice. God, do something." And I'm convinced God is screaming, He's shouting from eternity saying, "I have done something. I created you. Now you do something." few years ago, I was invited to Columbia University to, well, I didn't know it was for a debate. I thought it was for a conversation. But they had their senior scientist and the head of the Department of Humanities, who was a Kantian philosopher, and then me. And I was really distressed that I was representing God. And there's a packed room at the university, and the topic was what can be known, which I did not know was the topic. That would have been good to know. And the scientist began with this very prepared presentation saying what can be known is what is empirically provable. I thought, that's good, that's good. And then the Kantian philosopher said what can be known is human action ethics. And I thought, that's good too. And then it got to me, and I said, well, what can be known is I should be better prepared. And I said, but the problem is I'm not an expert at what can be known. In fact, I don't even think knowing is as important as imagining. Because the things we think we know, we find out later we didn't know, we just thought. So I don't know if what can be known is what needs to be known. In fact, we humans are just so layered at knowing. Have you ever noticed that? I know that 2 + 2 = 4. I know that there's red there and green there. I know that my wife in Los Angeles loves me. And they're not all the same. They're different layers of knowing. In fact, we humans know things we're not supposed to know. I was out of town for a couple of weeks. I flew home. I walked in the door. My wife, Kim, said, would you take out the garbage? Which is her way of saying, I love you, I miss you, glad you're home. I know that. Deep in my heart, I know that. And so she said, would you take out the garbage? I said, I just got home. Can I just rest for a few minutes? Which is my way of saying, I'm so happy to be home. It's good to see you. And so I sat down, and I got a phone call, and these guys said, Erwin, man, we got a court. Do you want to play basketball? And I said, hey, wait a minute. Let me talk to my wife. And so I went to Kim, and I said, honey, after I take out the garbage, can I go play basketball? Do you hear that? Okay, I just want to make sure, because like I have all these voices in my head and noises, and they're not always real. And so, okay. And so I said, honey, after I take out the garbage, can I go play basketball? Okay, good. And she goes, oh no, you're way too tired. You just sit down. We'll never let you go play basketball because you're so tired. I said, no, I'm re-energized. I don't know. I can take out the garbage and go play basketball. And my wife said, okay, let me understand. You've been gone from home for 2 weeks. This is your first night home, and you want to go play basketball with the guys. I said, well, you put it like that, it sounds bad, but you know how important it is to have male bonding. And she said, sure, go right ahead. And when she said, sure, go right ahead, I knew she didn't mean it, because I'm so good at knowing things. Layers and layers of knowing. I knew that when she said, sure, go right ahead, what she meant is if you choose to go play basketball with these guys, it's going to be so cold and miserable for you here when you get home. See, we know things we're not supposed to know. And Jesus said to Peter, who do you say that I am? And Peter said that you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, flesh and blood have not revealed these things to you, but my Father who's in heaven. See, what Jesus is saying is you know something you're not supposed to know. You cheated because you know things you're not supposed to. Have you ever known things you're not supposed to know? Have you ever known something in your gut, but your brain didn't validate it yet? I remember I was in Toronto. So then one of these students at Columbia sends me a question. When you were a child, you had imaginary friends. Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, God. Why did you get rid of all your other imaginary friends and keep God? Isn't that a great question? I love being asked questions like that in public at an Ivy League school. And I said, first of all, if you think I've given up my imaginary friends, you don't know me. I'm never giving up my imaginary friends. They've been with me all my life. I'm keeping them. I trust them. They understand me. But you're right. I gave up Santa Claus, and I gave up the Tooth Fairy, and God wasn't really my well-known friend as a child, but he was there on occasion visiting me. But I have kept God. But you see, when my son Aaron was a little boy, he wouldn't eat his vegetables, but he would eat dirt in the backyard. He wouldn't eat broccoli, but he would shove rocks in his mouth. And we'd put him in the backyard, and before we'd know it, we'd be fighting to pull those rocks out of his mouth right after dinner when we were fighting to put the peas in his mouth. After a few months of this, I said to my wife, Kim, honey, have you noticed that Aaron will not eat your cooking, but he will eat the dirt and the rocks? She didn't like that question. I was just asking. And finally, I said, I have an idea. I said, let's just throw the food in the backyard and put him back there to play and see what happens. Because he'll eat some dirt, he'll eat some peas. It could go better than it's been going. And my wife said, you should never be a parent. And just because he couldn't distinguish between the rocks and the broccoli, between what was good for him and what was not good for him, we didn't stop him from eating. We just taught him what makes him healthy. See, when I was a child, I had imaginary friends that were created in my imagination, but that doesn't mean there isn't a friend that created my imagination. See, the reality is that the imagination is the playground of God. It's the only place that God can meet us to pour into us his dreams for our lives. It's the only place God can show us a future we could never imagine. Because in your imagination, you can be someone you've never been. You can live a life you've never lived. You can create a future you've never known. In our imagination, we can imagine a world without poverty. In our imagination, we can imagine a world with justice. In our imagination, we can imagine a world without hunger, without homelessness. In our imagination, we can imagine a world where everyone is loved, where everyone belongs, where everyone knows the God who created them, where everyone has value and meaning in their life. And this imagination, it haunts us. It drives us. It fuels us. I want you to understand today that you are God's creation, created to carry his dreams and his vision. That you are not only a work of art, but you are an artist at work. And we need a revolution of creativity in this planet. We need to take the Bible back from those who turned it into a manuscript of conformity and reclaim it as our manifesto of creativity. We need to find the freedom to be human again, to allow God to pour into us a vision so profound, so powerful that it terrifies us. And God is looking for those men and women who refuse to accept life as it is, who refuse to accept the world as it is, who refuse to wait for someone else to make the world better. God is looking for that person who will wake up tormented that the world is not better, haunted that the world has not changed. God is looking for that person who will imagine a world that everyone else will run to. And I guarantee you, the moment you begin to allow God to breathe into your soul, the world he wants to create from you, through you, with you, you will never be the same again. See, we were misled. We were told, I think, therefore I am. But that is too limiting. I create because I breathe. I breathe, therefore I create. Because I am created to create, imagined to imagine. Because I have been created in the image and likeness of God. You have been created in the image and likeness of God. Never, never underestimate the gift of what it means to be human. God bless.